Getting beat up by 9 guys in Syracuse, to me, there's not a whole lot of shame.
Welcome to the Heel to the Face podcast.
And this right here,
with your hosts, Jared Wicks, Brandon Icebreaker Clements, and Paul Boy Green Esden.
It doesn't matter what your name is. And that's the bottom line. Cause Stone Cold said so. Best there is, the best there was, or the best there ever will be.
Brett screwed Brett because it's what's best for business.
To be the man, you gotta beat the man. The champ is here. Oh yeah, new Day Rock. And if you're not down with that, we got 2 words for ya.
Tweet us using the handle @HeelToTheFace.
Woo! Let's get ready to suck it.
The bell is rung, so let's step in the ring with your hosts, Paul, Brandon, and Jared.
I might as well tag me up with my buddies from Syracuse.
Coming off a tumultuous Royal Rumble, the Heel to the Face podcast is on the air to kick off February and to officially start the road to WrestleMania. And boy, we are on that road fast. So many matches already being made for the event before we can even get to the next pay-per-view. So without further ado, let me introduce our host, as always, Brandon the Icebreaker Clements. You can find him on Twitter @Icebreaker21. Myself, Jared Wicks. You can find me on Twitter @JaredWicks. But most importantly, follow the program @HeelToTheFace on Twitter. That's where you'll get our tweets of the week, our Twitter question of the week, and most importantly, the links to the show itself. We're on iTunes, we're on YouTube, and the Heel to the Face podcast is ready to get underway. So without further ado,
ladies and gentlemen, this is the main event of the evening with a 20-minute time limit.
So there's no better way to start the show, and there's no way that Brandon's going to let me start this show without. She's here. She fooled us all. She even said that she fooled us all.
Whoa. She didn't fool us all.
She didn't fool us all. She did not fool Brandon over here. He texted me Sunday morning of the Royal Rumble, and he said, when I went to sleep last night, I didn't see God. I didn't see any importance in my life. But I have this feeling that Ronda Rousey is going to be at the Royal Rumble. And
really good.
She did surprise you in a way, because I can tell you that just like every other WWE mark out there, including myself, when that number 30 hit and it was Trish Stratus's music,
You're like, ugh.
and you even texted me back, damn. And I know what that meant. That meant you were wrong.
I was partially wrong.
You were wrong for a minute.
I was wrong for literally like a couple minutes. I thought she was going to be in the Royal Rumble match.
And
she wasn't.
Of course, that's what everyone thought.
That's what we thought. But she made it. She was there a little bit later on. And actually, not to get too far off topic with it, but a lot of the women's division kind of gave her flack. Did you see it on Twitter?
Yes, and I will get to that's one of my tweets of the week, the quote-unquote flack
teaser
that she got for showing up at the Royal Rumble in Philadelphia after the Royal Rumble itself. So let's just break down the Royal Rumble pay-per-view. Overall, let me just tell you, and I want to kind of say this now. I know we give WWE a lot of slack for the pyro and a lot of stuff, but I want to go out here now, and I think the Royal Rumble is a good time to say this. We are now 4 years in to the WWE Network, and after watching the Royal Rumble, pardon me there, after watching the Royal Rumble, one thing that really came out to me after the event was over was, and I know we don't really think about it too much, but again, as I said, the WWE Network's 4 years in, is that the WWE, for the fact that we get these events for free, essentially, with $9.99 a month, they haven't really given us stuff that's not pay-per-view quality. And I know, we kind of thought about it at first, but I'm looking at now 4 years in, and that Royal Rumble was as good as it would have been if it was $59.99. Ooh. I thought that was a great event. It was the Royal Rumble is that time of year. And let me tell you, there are lots of times a year where I watch professional wrestling and I kind of take a step back and I wonder to myself why I watch this. SmackDown was kind of one of those this week. But the Royal Rumble event, and especially the fact that the Royal Rumble matches, and we had 2 of them, so we had 2 hours of I did not want to get up out of my seat. I did not want to, when I watch Raw or watch any other pay-per-view, even in a championship match, I might get up and I might go into the other room and grab a shirt, grab something. The Royal Rumble is that time where you don't grab food, you don't get up, you just stare at your TV for 2 hours with the women's and the men's Royal Rumble. And that that is what I love about professional wrestling, and that is what I loved about this Royal Rumble event. It was just like any other Royal Rumble. I was in it the whole time. I thought the men's Royal Rumble had that perfect mix of surprises, and I called one of the surprises Rey Mysterio.
Good call.
It was in my eyes, like I said, if that was a pay-per-view event, we go back to 2014, and I paid $49.99 for that.
You're a happy. You're a happy customer.
Well, let's be real. I would never happy paying $49.99 for pay-per-views, and I tried to get my way out of paying the full price at all costs. But
man, pun intended there.
that was one of the better Royal Rumbles.
All right. We were talking before the show. Here's my hot take, and the whole wrestling fan world, the internet wrestling community. You might disagree with me on this. The Royal Rumble was okay. I'm a big Royal Rumble guy. It's my favorite match of the year, favorite pay-per-view of the year. I thought it was okay. It was I guess it was good. I will say this, and you may disagree with me on this, but I have to say the better show was on Saturday. Takeover Philly was way better. Way better. There was 2, in my opinion, 5-star matches that could be early match of the year candidates out of that show.
I will say that when you say the Takeover is the better show, what you're saying is, and this kind of contradicts to a lot of our program, because we're quote-unquote WWE guys, then the people that are catering that are going to say NXT TakeOver is a better show are the same people who are going to say, well, obviously, then Royal Rumble moves down number 3, because then you got Wrestle Kingdom, you got TakeOver, you got probably another Ring of Honor show, you got another New Japan, because those, yes, TakeOver, when it comes to wrestling, was a better show. Wrestle Kingdom, when it comes to wrestling. But that's what's great about WWE, is now under the umbrella of WWE, they give us that indie wrestling we want, and they give us that WWE. And I love the Royal Rumble, and I'm not saying that TakeOver wasn't a great show. TakeOver was a great show for what TakeOver was one of the best takeovers that awesome. That they have had.
It was a great show. I'm not saying the Royal Rumble was awful. I wasn't saying it's a steaming pile of crap. I just think it was okay.
You can't compare the NXT in my eyes to the Royal Rumble, because you're comparing college football to pro football. You're comparing New Japan to WWE.
It's wrestling. It's still wrestling no matter what. To me it was a better show.
Then in that category, a middle of the year show by New Japan Pro Wrestling should get a larger audience than WrestleMania. If we're talking wrestling, WrestleMania is a perfect example. That is the biggest wrestling show of the year under WWE's banner, but sometimes it has some of the worst wrestling. I mean, it's the one show a year that has the largest audience to watch wrestling, and yet some of the matches are filled by Snooki, sumo wrestlers, Kevin Federline, the list goes on and on. I think he fought on a Raw one time. But
I'm a wrestling fan. Here's the thing. I was entertained from start to finish on NXT TakeOver.
Yes, and NXT TakeOver was a great show. I'm not trying to discount that. I'm just saying they just seem to be not the same. It's hard to compare NXT TakeOver to the Royal Rumble, because again, that's like comparing Wrestle Kingdom to WrestleMania.
And
they're very different in what they're trying to deliver.
They were still in the same arena.
Well, yes.
And I will say this, I could be wrong, go back to the tape, so to speak, but I felt from start to finish, the fans were way more engaged in NXT, except for Rousey. Except for the Rousey.
Well, the reason the fans, I think, are always well more engaged. If I watch an NXT, let's say WrestleMania weekend, I feel the fans are more into that than they are a lot of times WrestleMania, because those, again, are the fans who want to pay $300 to watch wrestling. They don't even, NXT in my eyes, I think they it's kind of annoying that they use the WWE entranceway, because it's not that kind of wrestling that those people want to see. When you have, like, let's say, an elaborate entrance, like an Adam Cole entrance, where you have the video on the walkway itself, and I'm like sitting here thinking this is supposed to be quote unquote the minor leagues, AAA, so they shouldn't have the large presentation, and the people there don't really like it.
So you would want to see Aleister Black's, his entrance on a grander scale? I do.
No,
I think it scales. I think it's great.
I do, and I like that. But what I'm saying is NXT, you got to compare that more to New Japan. You got to compare that more to, because that's what it's trying to deliver. It is not trying to deliver the Hurricane coming out. It's not trying to deliver. By the way,
that was a waste.
Tori Wilson. The NXT's not trying to do that. NXT is wrestling.
I don't think the Royal Rumble matches were. I don't think they were that great, to be honest with you.
That's why wrestling fans chant NXT, NXT, or back in the day they would chant ECW, or sometimes now they chant ROH, ROH. They don't chant WWE, WWE, because there's never a time that brand ever needs that umph of why we love this brand.
Let me ask you this. So, you say this is one of the best Royal Rumbles you've ever seen?
Yes, comparing it to other Royal Rumbles, yes, absolutely. The men's, at least. I mean, the women we have nothing to compare it to, and I feel like the men's was still the better Rumble, despite the fact that the women got the headline.
No offense, but I thought both Rumbles were underwhelming. I don't think they were.
See, I thought the men's Royal Rumble had a perfect mix of surprises. I like that they had surprises, but they didn't have, let's say, quote unquote, too many surprises.
Here's the thing. I don't want to see Titus O'Neil in the Royal Rumble. I don't want to see
Titus O'Neil, Apollo Crews. I felt, though, that you're going to get that. You're going to get the, there's always the guys. There's always those guys you see on the pre-show, let's say, that are like heavyweight contenders, like a Bobby Roode or something, that aren't in the Rumble, but then you see Apollo Crews in the Rumble.
Why not bring up some, why, how about this? Why waste?
We saw two NXT guys in the Royal Rumble. We saw the champion and Adam Cole.
Which, actually, the funny part
was... But you can't give it all to NXT guys, because then that takes away... Then we have a women's Royal Rumble where it's literally half people who are not in there.
You know what's funny? Yeah, the women's Royal Rumble didn't have anybody from NXT.
The women's Royal Rumble was, to me, a perfect example of why the Royal Rumble should have been 20 women and not 30 women, because
they threw Vicky Guerrero in there at the last minute.
My question is, what are they going to do next year? Are they going to have it at 30? Because they're going to have to create a lot more women, because they can't just be relying on 12 legends. This year they had 11 non-full-time WWE divas.
Does that count Vicky?
That counts Vicky.
Okay.
So you had, the Kelly, Tori Wilson, Michelle McCool, Vicky, Trish Stratus, all those people. You had 11 of them. So essentially, if you had a 20-women Royal Rumble, you know what I mean? You could have taken out a few women, let's say, who didn't really quote-unquote deserve to be there. Or, make it like the men's, where you're surprised. Meaning this year they had so many that it was every woman plus they had to come up with 11. I would like 20, because then it would be like the men's, where you have a Bobby Roode who's healthy, or you have an Usos who are healthy, but then they're just not in the Rumble. I like the surprise of who's not in the Rumble on the main roster, because not everybody's in it. The women, it's so big that everyone was in it that was a woman.
No, not really.
Who wasn't in it that wasn't a diva, that wasn't on the current roster?
There wasn't any NXT. There was one NXT. I stand corrected.
I'm saying in the current WWE on SmackDown or Raw, any woman on SmackDown or Raw, name a woman on SmackDown or Raw that wasn't in it. I can name men on women on SmackDown or Raw that weren't in the men's Rumble. Lots of them. The whole pre-show.
Technically, Alicia Fox wasn't in it.
Well, yeah, because she was injured. Yes, and that's the problem. That's why you need a 20 women's Royal Rumble.
But they only had one women's wrestler from NXT. That was Ember Moon. That was it. And she had a good run, by the way.
So you think there needs to be more NXT stars in the Royal Rumble?
They dropped the ball. Where was the Iconic Duo? I was calling for that a month ago. Why aren't the two Australian girls up in the main roster right now? They could have used them instead of wasting on Vicky Guerrero. They could have used those two. I'm not saying them to win it, but to make it a little more interesting. There was one NXT women's superstar.
And if I could be honest with you, I bet you that one women's superstar, speaking of Ember Moon, might have been a last-minute replacement for Alicia Fox. So if Alicia Fox was there, we might not have seen Ember Moon.
The way they put it together, I would say Vicky Guerrero was the last minute.
You think so?
Yeah.
The reason I'm saying Ember Moon was the last minute was just because of the fact that I feel that everybody else would had to have their flights booked and been there. Ember Moon would have been somebody who was already there, so you can fill her in at the last minute. I feel like a Michelle McCool wouldn't have been in Philadelphia on Friday when Alicia Fox was quote unquote still healthy.
Michelle McCool, by the way, had a great showing.
Yeah,
she looked good.
Of all the quote unquote divas, she had one of the better showings, but
a lot of them didn't. I'll be honest. I thought a lot of the former divas, I thought it was underwhelming for some of them.
I think it should be 20 women, because if you have 20 women, then you can actually have women who are on Raw and SmackDown who maybe don't make the cut. Remember back in the day they had Royal Rumble qualifying matches? See, what would be nice with 20 women is maybe you could have Royal Rumble qualifying matches. You might still be an honor. Like, for example, like I said, nobody on 205 Live was in the men's Royal Rumble. That's an entire roster of people who weren't in the men's Royal Rumble. And I kind of like that, because while there is a lot of people, it doesn't just mean everyone. It's still limited. The women's Royal Rumble, though, wasn't limited. And I'm wondering, what are they going to do when they don't have 11 Hall of Famers to rely on, when they might have 3 Hall of Famers to rely on? Where are they going to come up with the other women? And then it's just they're going to have to raid everyone from NXT. 20 makes it so that it's still an honor to be in the Rumble. So you don't know You don't 20 would mean that you wouldn't even know if Sasha Banks was in it for sure. Kind of like the way in the men's, we didn't know that Seth Rollins was in it for sure. We're like, oh, well, they have a tag team match, so Seth Rollins might not be in it. And then Jason Jordan, he was not in it. So
that part was cool. I'll give you that.
So that's what I'd like to see, where there are people from the main roster who are not in it. I'd like to see that with the women, where you kind of know because Sasha Banks is like a John Cena, but you don't know for sure.
I just think
now we know for sure.
I just think, you know, I like a little bit of nostalgia. I wasn't expecting on the women's side we saw a lot of nostalgia. That was cool, but we didn't see a lot of on the men's side. Hurricane, I think that was the only one that came to mind.
You know, I think though I kind of like that we don't have too much nostalgia. We had Hurricane and we had Rey Mysterio.
Is Rey Mysterio? Do we know if he's full time or is it a one-off? Do we know?
You know, I
haven't read anything that he is.
I haven't read anything that Hurricane or himself. And watching 205 Live this week, none of them made any appearances. They got the 205 Live tournament now starting this week. And I noticed that they haven't revealed any of the matches outside of what you're about to see, meaning they had 2 matches on 205 Live, but they didn't reveal outside. And they revealed what we're going to see next week, but they haven't revealed like the entire bracket of what we're going to see. And I'm kind of curious now, moving over to 205 Live. So we have a new general manager, and unfortunately, not Rey Mysterio, not a huge name. The former quote unquote Impact Wrestling rock star Spud is now the general manager of 205 Live. My question is, so this tournament is going to last until WrestleMania. How are you going to keep 205 Live fresh for those who are now out of the tournament? Let's say like a Tyler Bates, who is now out of the tournament. So now he essentially can't even pretend to be in competition to be wrestling for the Cruiserweight belt for the next 4 months. How are you going to keep him fresh to the audience?
They wrestle on Raw.
You want to see You want to see them on Raw?
I wouldn't say. I don't want to say like I want to see.
I'm saying like on 205 Live, or where essentially we're just going to get tournament matches,
which is fine.
We're not going to see any non-tournament matches on Raw.
You got to remember Tyler Bate and Pete Dunne; those guys have wrestled on NXT, so you can still slide those guys.
Yeah, they're going to have like
NXT.
a Roderick Strong and stuff like he's going to be on there next week. I'm just wondering, you're in the tournament. It's not like in sports, like when you're in a tournament and then the tournament's over, your season's over. I mean, it would be like if you're in a tournament for the NFL championship or something, and you lose, but then you still have 4 or 5 months. You still have to compete, and you still have to legitimize yourself.
You still got to play games.
You still have, yeah. So, and that's kind of here with like the cruiserweights is like, okay, now that the ones who are out of the tournament, out of the running, how do we keep them important? How do we keep people caring if they win or lose when we know that there's no cruiserweight opportunity for them even 4 months down the line? I mean, because the Royal Rumble, while the winner gets a chance at WrestleMania, there's still another belt out there. So it's like it's not as important as it used to be because there still is another belt out there. So people like Seth Rollins, for example, people like John Cena, they're not done fighting for the belt. And obviously with Elimination Chamber and Fastlane coming up, it's like the Royal Rumble is like an option to go to WrestleMania, but then there's like 6 other options. This cruiserweight thing, they're going all in on this tournament. There's no like Elimination Chamber second option to get to WrestleMania.
That's the one plus of having the split. The brand split, the brand split, is if the winner is on SmackDown,
it's like the Royal Rumble, and then the Raw goes on as usual
they can have a tournament.
The Royal Rumble,
I mean, that's the one thing I like about the split. I'm not a big fan of the split in general because I think it waters down the talent. But in this scenario, I think it works because Shinsuke, we already kind of figured it was going to be the dream match, AJ Styles versus Shin anyway. So that we already kind of saw that coming. Now you got the Elimination Chamber coming up to see who's going to face Lesnar.
Yeah.
I mean, what you think about that match? The Strowman, Lesnar, Kane. What you think?
It was what it was. It's Strowman kind of being typical Strowman. I mean, his matches, I just feel that they do a lot of stunts now where they're kind of losing a little of the entertainment factor out of him. I'm wondering what's going on so much with Kane because from what I hear, he's still in the mayoral race and he's still trying to become the mayor of Clark County, Tennessee. So, I'm kind of wondering what is the idea? What does the future hold for Kane? Obviously, now he's out of the running for this Elimination Chamber because that was a qualifying match.
Do you think he retires?
I mean, we see him off TV for a while. I'm guessing.
Well, it's funny. Speaking of retirement, Mark Henry, who we all were talking that he retired. He came out and said, "No, I'm not retired." So where the hell does that go?
I don't
get it.
I don't know, because he's not really being booked, so it's kind of the same as being retired, right?
I guess. I mean, he hasn't. Here's the thing.
I don't think Kane's quote unquote retiring. I don't think he's ever retiring. Even if he's the mayor, I don't know if he's going to be quote unquote retired.
He'll come back once in a while.
Like a Royal. If you show up at the Royal Rumble, does that kind of still being retired?
Now, let me ask you this though. With Kane, you got all these different superstars. Do you think a guy like Kane, maybe he does, he goes into the sunset? Do you think he ever does? Or do you think he does do these one-off appearances here and there? He's still like, how you have the Legends deal? Like Gene Okerlund has a Legends deal where he shows up whenever?
I think
Mark Henry's going to, the only way we know Mark Henry's going to retire.
Kane personally would go away. I think that he wouldn't mind it. But because his character is not, I feel like with some of these characters that aren't so important, that they never really truly retire. For example, like a Hurricane Helms or a Rey Mysterio. When The Undertaker retires, I feel like he'll make less appearances than when a Kane retires, because when these lesser important people retire, they don't ever really retire because they still like those paydays. I feel like the bigger names fully retire. Like the Ric Flair, and it's hard to say because they still make appearances, a lot of appearances.
Yeah, Ric Flair makes
they
good
make
money.
appearances that are announced. I feel it when Kane stops wrestling, it'll be similar to when the Big Show stops wrestling, where he'll just kind of fade away and he'll just get booked less and less. I know his contract is up at WrestleMania, but I wouldn't say he's going to just be retired. I feel like
guys like
just
that
means like they get booked. There's not like an announced retirement. They just kind of go away.
The only way I will...
Kind of like when Kane went away before. We thought he was retired when he started running for mayor, and then he went away, and we're like, oh, I guess we won't see him for a while.
And he came back.
And then he came back.
But when Mark Henry, I think for what he's done for the business, his accolades, you can't just let him, go into the sunset. Give him a retirement thing.
And there's a lot of rumors that he could be one of the names this year in the Hall of Fame.
That would be cool. I would be cool with that as a retirement,
and that's kind of WWE's way of saying, no, you're retired because we say you're retired. That's why and by putting you in the Hall of Fame,
he still wants to go.
He's kind of like with Kurt Angle. It's they brought him back, but at the same time, they didn't really so much want to bring him back as an in-ring competitor. I knew they wanted to bring him back as like a GM and that kind of role. I don't think they really ever wanted to bring him back as an in-ring competitor.
He could still
they
go,
brought
though.
him back as the Hall of Fame as a way to bring him back and to kind of remind him like, we want you here, but we don't want you to like wrestle. Because if we want you to wrestle, we'd bring you back at the Royal Rumble.
But he had a good showing with the Shield.
Well, he did, yes.
I think he can still go. I don't expect, here's my thing, a guy like Kurt Angle is a perfect example. I don't expect Kurt Angle to go full-time wrestling, but I would think he would do sporadic appearances, almost like in the Brock Lesnar sense. I could see him, and I'm not saying he's going to be the next Brock Lesnar by any means, like be the champion, but I think he could still have a little bit of run where he wrestles for a little bit, takes some time off, wrestles a little bit, takes some time off. It's a cool thing. I guess we'll have to see because I think he's still got plenty left in the tank.
Before we close out, what do you make of the new, not too much new, but the new kind of graphics on Raw and the incredibly new graphics on SmackDown? Raw kind of went to like a white apron color, and they started to have a little more dynamic graphics when the wrestlers come to the ring. And then SmackDown has just it's not about dynamic graphics in the name cards. It's about dynamic graphics in every word that they said. It's like I'm watching Snapchat.
I thought it was cool.
See, the Raw one doesn't bother me too much. It kind of just looks like they changed the format a little bit. But the SmackDown,
it really bothers you?
Yes. And because this kind of goes to our, Twitter question of the week, for example. We'll get to that in a minute, but it's all about, kayfabe, and it's all about, we understand that this is a scripted event.
Absolutely.
But when you have graphics to go along with what you're saying, I mean, it just amplifies the fact that you're not going off script because you have graphics to accompany you. When they catch somebody in the back and they say something and there's literally closed captioning in, a ransom note style for like the Usos, like they're coming out next. And when they say we're coming out next, graphic on the screen on a live program says they're coming out next. It's like you can't even think that they might have ad-libbed that they're coming out next. That instead of like Vince McMahon saying just say you're on your way to the ring, say it however you want. Say you're coming out next. No, they literally know they practice that word for word. And you know what? And that adds to the fact that this week a quote unquote list was revealed from some sources in WWE. Jerry Lawler has personally said he's never seen this list before because they give him some sort of leeway, but a terminology for announcers, for example, like they say, do not say titles and do not say belts, say championships. Do not say title shot, say championship opportunity.
What the hell's the point of that?
Do not say hospital, say medical center.
Stop scripting it so damn much.
That's what I'm saying. We understand that it's scripted, but a part of what we like about wrestling, a part of the reason people always get on wrestling more than they get on movies is because of the fact that wrestling does have a few different elements than a TV show, than a movie, that it is a live performance that is scripted and choreographed. It has that mix. That's why wrestling is in a different category than movies. That's why somebody who loves Batman will scold me all day because wrestling's fake, right? But I love Superman. There's a reason why he has that mentality, because it is put in that quote-unquote different category, and the people who do like wrestling, like ourselves, like that different category. We loved The Miz and Maurice versus John Cena and Nikki Bella last year because we love that mix of realism with the choreographed. We understand that it's choreographed 99%. But when they added the graphics, I just feel that just cartoonizes it way too much.
It does. I mean, the thing I will say,
At SmackDown, I just felt like I was watching a cartoon.
I get it, but I did like when the Usos. I did like the graphics.
You like the lockdown?
I thought that was cool.
And then the jail cell coming down,
and you hear the sound lockdown. You hear the door slamming.
And again,
I like that though. That's cool.
And again, the fact that they had those graphics. It showed that that whole spiel felt so scripted because they were like listing them off and it was coming down one at a time, and you're like, it just
lockdown, slam,
lockdown, slam. Like it was like
I like that. It was different. I wouldn't do this I wouldn't do it every week. I think it's cool to spice it up once in a while. I get what you're saying. I wouldn't do it every promo they have. Oh, lockdown.
They did it almost every.
Well, I'm just saying. It was. Hopefully, it's maybe
Daniel
a
Bryan talking about the top 10, saying out who's coming out next.
Well, if they keep doing the lockdown thing too much, where they make this, they make the
Shinsuke Nakamura, I think, said rock star right across the screen, if I'm not mistaken. Like it was.
It's okay to spread it in once in a while, but I wouldn't expect. Hopefully, the Usos promos are not like that going forward. Speaking of their promos, real quick, their promos are fantastic. By the way. They are so good. They're the best tag team talkers right now. Yeah. Hands down.
And they proved that at the Royal Rumble. That the one thing, quote unquote, off the script that I did like is the Royal Rumble gave us 2 straight falls. And you're so used to the WWE pushing it to Game 7 of the World Series every time they ever do that. But to actually kind of show some realism that you see in real sports, to kind of give it that element of that, not everything is always the most exciting. Not every Iron Man match is tied going into 60 minutes.
It was still a good match.
Yes, it was still a good match, and it kind of showed it that we shouldn't always expect it to go 3 falls because that's kind of the curve. In real sports, going to Game 7 is kind of the thing we don't expect. Being a clean sweep versus going to Game 7 or going to the 3rd fall in WWE. Now that is something we don't expect.
And the best part was, it was a 2-0 sweep. It was still a great match. I enjoyed it, but it also shows that the Usos really are the best tag team in the world right now.
So when we return, we'll get to our Twitter question of the week, and we'll talk more about that kayfabe versus realism that we were just talking about, as you're listening to the Heels of the Face podcast on Sports War Radio, Rat Pack Radio, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and on YouTube.
The New York Jets are rising and are ready to compete in the AFC. Boy Green and Ty Butler will give you everything you need to know about the Jets every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. From reviewing the previous game and looking ahead to the next matchup, to all of the news and its 4 downs, the Jet Zone has everything. Follow @BoyGreen25 and @TyDButler on Twitter. Proud member of Sports War Radio. Let the battle begin.
This program is simulcast on WRPR Rat Pack Radio. Go to ratpacksports.com for more information.
Do you want to stay up to date on the latest sports news? Come check out After the Whistle from 4 to 5 p.m. every Friday night. We talk about the NHL, we talk about the NFL, we talk about the MLB, you name it, we got it. Tune in on Sports War Radio.
Now is the time to get your voice heard. Sports War Radio is now accepting applications for driven and knowledgeable sports fans who want to start their very own podcast about their favorite team. Sports War Radio has an international audience and is growing fast. Don't miss the chance to become the go-to news source for your favorite team. Email sportswarradio@gmail.com and tell us why you would be a great addition to our team. Sports War Radio. Let the battle begin.
Now is the time to get your voice heard. Sports War Radio is now accepting applications for driven and knowledgeable sports fans who want to start their very own podcast about their favorite team. Sports War Radio has an international audience and is growing fast. Don't miss the chance to become the go-to news source for your favorite team. Email sportswarradio@gmail.com and tell us why you would be a great addition to our team. Sports War Radio. Let the battle begin.
Let's get back to the action. This is the Heel to the Face podcast on Sports War Radio.
Back here on the Heel to the Face podcast, it's time for our social media segments of the week, our Twitter question of the week, and our tweets of the week. So let's get right into it. So our Twitter question of the week goes back to our first segment. So earlier this week, Ronda Rousey obviously made her debut at the Royal. Know about this? What do you know, Stephanie? And she says, I'm just as shocked as you are. You know, I've got no answer. But it was obviously minutes after the Royal Rumble was over. You see Stephanie McMahon posing with Triple H. Obviously, Ronda Rousey then did an interview with ESPN, and where she said, you know, I needed a lot of help from Triple H and Stephanie McMahon to, you know, to make this happen. So, and like I said, they posed, Stephanie McMahon and Triple H posed on the entranceway, I think while some fans were still in attendance. So with that being said, so she's posing but then acting shocked on TV immediately. Does WWE go too far out of kayfabe? And 67% of people said they do want more kayfabe, and 33% say it's perfect the way it is. I'm in the 67% saying I want a little more. I don't need the bad guys, only showing up at Denny's with the other bad guys and pretending that they do not know the good guys. And when it comes to things like Make-A-Wish, and when it comes to, some things that really matter, it's fine to obviously break out of character. It's fine to break out of character in many events. But I just feel like I was watching a Stephanie McMahon promo from England where she was talking to some English broadcasters about promoting a show over in the UK. And I feel that they just go too far out. For example, like The Rock has always been kind of that perfect mix where he is kind of his character. Stone Cold Steve Austin, the same. He is kind of his character. But some of these people go way overboard. For example, you do have two people who are feuding. Of all the women in the world who are going to promote a show out in the UK, we have two women coming on our show, and they just happen to be feuding with each other at the moment. And you're like, can you get two other women, maybe two good guys, two bad guys, Do we have to have the two women who are literally in the middle? That'd be like last year having The Miz and John Cena as your promoters for WrestleMania on the Today Show together the day before the Today Show. You're like, and then they openly admit on the Today Show, we're feuding in WWE right now, so I hate you. I hate you too. That's a WWE thing. But seriously, folks, like we get that it's scripted, but you don't need to be so outlandish by it. What's your vote?
I was in the minority on this one. I like it the way it is. I think it's just a good mix the way it is right now. We all know that Stephanie really knew. I just think it brings more to the programming. I thought when Michael Cole's like, Stephanie, what do you know? You want to tell us more? I'm just as shocked as you are, Cole. I like it. I guess I'm in the minority.
I like that she said that too. What I don't like is it like minutes later she's publicly putting on Twitter like, great to see Ronda Rousey and like smiling on the entranceway while fans haven't even left the stadium yet and they're in the background. I'm sitting here going like, you can take a photo, I understand, but like you literally have to post that on social media like seconds after you're quote unquote shocked.
That's what social media is now.
You know what I mean?
That's what they do.
Charlotte and Alexa Bliss, I didn't see them do this, but you saw them in the ring, kind of like champions angry at each other. And then it would literally be like before I'm done watching the Royal Rumble showing a picture of them like, kissing and hanging out and like can't wait to hang out with my best friend Charlotte Flair, and you're like, dude, like the Royal Rumble's not even over yet, like, and you're already like having to put this out on Twitter.
That's the problem with social media.
Yeah, I mean, social media has done a lot of this.
Yeah, it's social media's fault. It's good. It's good in one aspect where the wrestlers and and all the entertainers can interact with their fans. I like that part of it, but at the same time, they're still human, and they're still gonna, if they like taking selfies, they're gonna take selfies. So it's like, does WWE enact a policy where don't take photos till after the show? Maybe.
And my thing is, again, they don't need to quote unquote enact a policy, or it's just
they might have to.
Smaller things. Why would they enact a policy if they're doing it?
Somebody got fired for the social media. Remember, I forget his name, but he was like a lesser known like NXT guy.
Are you talking about like Jimmy Jacobs, posing with the outside of WWE guys?
Well, no, what wasn't it? Wasn't there somebody that made a comment about what the hell is her name? Emma. When Emma got the boot, and like someone's like, haha, you deserved it, kind of thing, and they got canned.
Well, I know that Jimmy Jacobs,
something
he got
like that. I feel like
proposing for a picture outside an LA show with some of the Ring of Honor guys. You know what I mean? What do you say? Like the original Bullet Club or something like that. It was one of my tweets of the week a while ago.
I remember that.
So there's but again, why should they be held responsible if people like Triple H and Stephanie McMahon are doing it themselves?
Well, maybe Vince has to enact a policy for everybody, whether you're management or not. If it's that big of a deal.
I don't think they should quote unquote enact a policy. I think they should quote unquote, just as an entire company, just kind of be a little more mindful of just going out of your way. That's the thing. I'm not saying you need to hide anything. Just don't go out of your way to reveal it. And it's the same in movies. It's the same in movies. If you watch Batman, they don't go out of their, it's not real. It's scripted. We like that it's scripted. We know there's no such thing as Batman. But if you go to a red carpet and they say, how did you do that stunt? They don't go, well, let's see. We had a red dye mix number 75 and we mixed it into a beaker and then we threw it into the water and the water was really, a Petri dish, but then we zoomed in with this specific ledge made by Nikon. Like they don't get in like to that.
Technically speaking.
Yes. They magic of movies, you know what I mean? Wrestling can kind of do that. It doesn't have to be, for example, here's a good example of that. And now let's move on to my tweet of the week. So my example of that is my tweet of the week with Nia Jax putting out. So WWE put on Twitter, up next on Monday Night Raw, we're going to relive the moment you all been talking about, Ronda Rousey's debut, and Nia Jax, and a few of the other divas have kind of joined in. But she subtweeted that by saying, cool, she's here. I guess 30 women making history can just be forgotten. Now, obviously, Nia Jax and Ronda Rousey, probably really good friends. And, this just kind of pushes forward the storyline of we're not supposed to like Ronda Rousey. We're in a division where we're competing with her, and kind of creating some of that fire. And that's kind of the perfect example. We know it's scripted. We know Nia Jax and Ronda Rousey, or quote unquote Nia Jax and the WWE, marketing team are not at odds end. I know Nia Jax probably didn't walk into a Monday morning meeting, mad that they're promoting Ronda Rousey and not the Royal Rumble.
I think it's a work. It's a work.
But we like that she kind of is showing a little of her character of like, I shouldn't be happy about this.
Well, yeah, it's a good work, I think.
And this is kind of what I want to see. This is what I want to see. We know it's scripted, but this kind of shows that, and for example, The Miz and John Cena, they might not have hated each other, but they did dislike each other for a little bit. And The Miz even admits, him and Maurice off camera were doing the John Cena, Nikki Bella skits in their car long before they ever did it on TV. Because they kind of had that quote unquote animosity towards each other. And that's what's cool. It's a scripted match. These are scripted promos, but there is some of that realism in there.
I like to have a little mix.
Yes.
A little bit.
That's exactly where I'm coming from.
No, I don't expect it. I don't expect, and none of us are going to expect WWE to ever go like full on real, obviously. That would be UFC, so to speak.
Yes.
But I do like, it is scripted, but I like it when they kind of go off script and they kind of let things, happen organically. I think that's where the best things happen. I mean, like CM Punk's pipe bomb.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, that was awesome.
The number 2 most important moment on Raw 25's most important moments, and that's saying a lot. When you make the number 2 biggest moment in Raw history, somebody promo, and not just somebody themselves, but the promo of somebody that you're trying to kind of phase out a little bit. That shows how, that moment was liked.
That's the thing. Vince wants CM Punk back. He just doesn't want to come out and publicly say it. He wants him back.
But part of that Raw 25, he was, the clips that he used from his pipe bomb. He was talking about New Japan Wrestling, Ring of Honor, some of the stuff that you shouldn't even scripted, non-scripted, even if he was given permission. It's kind of like go out there and say whatever you want. But if I went out somewhere and I spoke however I wanted, but I started to use copyrighted terms or something like that, they would say, okay, well, you can't really do that.
You got to be careful there.
Yeah.
Buddy. Yeah.
So, the fact that he was literally using the names of other companies like New Japan Wrestling, Ring of Honor, Colt Cabana, and other brands outside of WWE, not just speaking within WWE, and then they played those clips on the number 2 most important moment in Raw history, kind of shows that even they can acknowledge
it was good.
That it was good.
Yeah. Now, speaking of Monday nights, I think you noticed something a little different on the commentary side of things.
I did.
My tweet that
goes to your realism too, because look at that. Jonathan Coachman providing that credible voice.
And you know what's nice, and it's funny because I was watching the Royal Rumble, and I was sitting there talking to everybody, and I'm like, Booker. Do I love Booker T because he makes sense, or do I? Or no, I don't. Do I like Booker T because he doesn't make sense, or do I hate Booker T because he doesn't make sense? And I was just going over Twitter, and I was like, am I the only one thinking this? And I got this great tweet from @JR Polkel. Hopefully I got that right. Hopefully I didn't chop it up. He says here, I'm not sure if I hate that Booker T never makes sense on commentary or if I love that Booker T never makes sense on commentary. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm glad I'm not the only one that thinks that, because I think the back and forth between him and Corey Graves is really funny.
Yeah, because I love when he says something like completely off the wall, and then Corey Graves
makes no
like,
sense. What are you talking about, Booker? And it was nice. I mean, I had a feeling Coach was coming back because I think Coach, and ESPN split ways not too long back.
A lot of times, what I like to kind of get off your point is that, stay on your point, is that, Corey Graves, a lot of times, he has to be real, and it's kind of fun when Booker T says something ridiculous.
You're like, what are you
Adam Cole! Nobody knows who Adam Cole is, and Corey Graves would be like, you idiot. Like, you work for the network. He was here last night. You're like, but not in Philadelphia. And you're like, yes. He
wasn't Philadelphia.
Like, they have to, be real. Like,
It's
he
funny.
actually can't even just go off, kind of be scripted. He has to literally be like, what are you talking about? I know that we're supposed to read off the script right now, but I literally have to mention live that you are wrong. Not like your opinion is wrong, but you are wrong.
You know what's great about Booker, too? He took it all in stride when Jonathan Coachman replaced him. He went on Twitter and said, best of luck to Coach. And, he's excited
to lose.
Well, no, he takes it the right way. I mean, sometimes when people get demoted, they act out on social media. We've seen that, but he took it in stride. I think deep down he probably wishes he was still on, but he's still on he's not on Raw, but he's still on the kickoff show, so he's still doing that.
Remember, he was kind of always looked at as a fill-in. He was never really supposed to be there full time when he first came in.
They just kind of let him.
So maybe that's a lot of the reason why he took it in stride, for that fact alone.
Plus, plus it worked out perfectly. Coach and ESPN parted ways, and then the Coach comes in, and you're absolutely right. Coach brings in that credibility because he's a former, he's a sports guy, sportscaster, ESPN, and he was a former WWE guy before that. It's like, oh, he's the guy who was in WWE years ago. Took his talents to ESPN, did a great job there, and now he's back hanging out with us. What more credibility do you need?
Before we go on the program, I just wanted to kind of throw this off you. Now we are off our Twitter question and our tweets of the week. So watching NXT, I find it very ironic because if you watch old ECW under the WWE banner from 2006 to 2010, it's funny that when ECW came to a close, it was not the Tuesday night time slot that came to a close. It was ECW coming to a close. And next week at this time slot at 10 o'clock on the Sci-Fi Network, we're going to start a brand new program called NXT. Now, nobody obviously knew where it was going to go, and it was going to become this big thing that it has now. But I just find it so ironic that WWE obviously knows, in the sense of Triple H, knows what we want when it comes to NXT. And I just find it so funny that NXT, in my eyes, it wouldn't be a better product, but imagine if that's what ECW was all along. This is what the rebranding, when we look at like WWE bringing back ECW and why ECW was so good, because it was wrestling versus, all the gimmicks that you see a lot of times. It still has gimmicks, but they're not so outlandish. They're on a smaller scale. And I'm sitting here thinking it's funny that NXT replaced ECW, because essentially if NXT was ECW, Paul Heyman was the GM. William Regal's the GM. Let's say Paul Heyman was the GM. And NXT exactly was that. It was what it was in real life. What ECW was in real life. It was a lot of guys who were really trying to prove themselves to get to WWE someday. And I'm kind of in the advocacy of, obviously it is what it is now, But what about, I'm kind of sick of them using this takeover name for everything. It's time to start changing that up a little bit. So maybe we start to give them the old ECW pay-per-view names. For example, let's say instead of, takeover Philadelphia, that could have been, one of, guilty as charged. And instead of Survivor Series, or the takeover, wherever Survivor Series was, Houston, it could have been November to Remember. So give them some of these. I just feel like I feel the takeover thing is kind of going away. And one last point I want to make, and it goes to the sets, and this is a problem. NXT, I feel, felt more different than the Royal Rumble because they use different lighting. They kind of show it in a different way. And I feel that when I was watching NXT TakeOver, I feel that that's kind of what WWE should be doing with their main. I think it's silly that NXT felt different. But then the Royal Rumble, while the event was great, the presentation is like Raw. NXT, because they use different barricades.
Yeah.
With the NXT on them.
Yep.
And because they dim down the lights, I mean, it just shows you right there that, maybe why doesn't the Royal Rumble look like that? If you're going to use the same entranceway, stuff like that, just stupid little things like that can make me realize that I'm watching. Like NXT felt more like a pay-per-view, because back in the day when I was a kid, a pay-per-view versus a Raw was a different presentation versus TV. It was a different set. It was different lighting.
It was a special occasion.
So that's what I look at when I look at NXT. I'm like, this feels like the pay-per-view.
And here's my last point on that. This is why when Triple H takes the keys over, to Raw and SmackDown, I think the product's going to be even better, because Triple H is doing a hell of a job in NXT. I love NXT. It's so interesting. You just never know what's going to happen next. It's not predictable. I don't think it's as predictable as Raw and SmackDown, because they're not like, we have to shove Roman Reigns down your throat. No, it's literally like the land of opportunity. Like Aleister Black. He had a hell of a show. He's had a hell of a showing since he's been there, but they still show, okay, you can lose once in a while.
Yeah.
It's I like it.
It's what ECW, man, this has just been so awesome. I mean, I understand it's got its own name and it is what it is, but it would have been, it's kind of, what it kind of reminds me of? It kind of reminds me of when a team fails in the world of professional sports and they're just not any good in the city that they're in, and then they move to a new city. And then they take off, and you're like, if we would have had this talent, we would have succeeded. If, the Washington Nationals played like this in Montreal, they would have never had attendance problems, and they would have never left.
Yeah.
So it's similar to that with this NXT. If you would have just done this instead of trying to give us Ezekiel Jackson versus Christian and Johnny Nitro, and all, you gave us this dim lighting, or the smaller sets. For example, the TV tapings are taped in a small studio, similar to ECW, small 500 seat crowd, versus and then like the pay-per-views, larger crowd, but still even a smaller crowd, because you dim the lights down, so it looks like everything's a little more condensed, because it doesn't look like you're selling out a 20,000 seat arena. It looks more like a small arena because you dim the light. It looks more intimate.
Yeah.
And you're sitting here thinking, if this was ECW to begin with, if you were selling us December to Dismember back when they sold us the quote-unquote Extreme Elimination Chamber, and they gave us TakeOver, ECW would still be thriving on Tuesday nights.
Probably. Yeah. More than likely, yeah.
And we would love it, and we would be like, wow, Vince McMahon, he took this to where he brought it back, and he I don't know if he made it better, but he kept it going strong. Instead, it died, and then NXT came in its place and pretty much gave us what we thought when we got it. Why ECW fans got excited is because they thought they were going to get this. And now we have this. It's just too bad we couldn't have had it under the ECW name, because that would have been cool to bring back some of those ECW pay-per-view names and kind of keep the tradition alive. Yeah. Let's say instead of the NXT Championship, the ECW Championship. So when we're hyping up TakeOver, you can kind of show some vignettes and some montages and video of who held the belt before, going back like you do at WrestleMania, Royal Rumble, stuff like that. So it would have had some history, but it would have been what it is, again, with history.
Yeah,
that would have been awesome. It is what it is. NXT, in my eyes, is what ECW should have been all along, but we're glad that it is what it is, and we're glad that you joined the program once again this week on Heel to the Face. For my partner, Icebreaker, Brandon Clements. You can find him on Twitter at Icebreaker21, myself, Jared Wicks, and at Heel to the Face on Twitter. This has been the Heel to the Face podcast on Sports War Radio, Rat Pack Radio, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and on YouTube.